They always say never despise humble beginnings. If there was ever a miracle, or if you ever wanted to see a miracle or touch one, indeed you're looking at one. I always tell people that I am a miracle. Truth be told, I shouldn't be standing here or sitting where I'm sitting had it been not for the grace of God upon my life. I truly am in awe at the goodness of God and what He has done with my life. I've been through hell and back, and I'm still standing, and had it been not for the grace of God, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I emphasize it everywhere I go, because I believe strongly that I've been given a second chance to make an indelible impression on the footsteps of history through the people that I come across and through the people I meet. Born and bred in the township to a family of 9, including my parents. My father worked for a company called Van Leer, and my mother was a domestic worker for the rest of his life. Actually, when I was in the US, I phoned my mother. The first job I got, I phoned my mother, said, "You have to quit the job," and I doubled her salary as a token of appreciation for who she is and what she has done for me and how she knitted and held our family together. But I was born in that home, very poor. I struggled with identity issues. I never thought I knew who I was. And if you grow up in the township, like many of us grow up in the township, I never saw expression of love given to my mother by my father. I had 4 sisters and 2 brothers, and I was the youngest. So you would call me technically a spoiled brat in the true sense of the word, in a context of a township. We went to a church called Dutch Reform in Kerk of Africa, which is another dimension that I never understood. How could we as a family subscribe to a church that was Afrikaans at the time? But those questions lingered in the back of my head, and I didn't have any answers. I hated Christianity like you would not believe it, because whilst my mother was working in the kitchens, Godi kitchening, I would go and check her out, and it was the first time I was introduced to a refrigerator, and I was shocked at how that refrigerator was full. And here we are, coming to the township, Brijas Koko. We're just people who were just eating basic foods. And I had this animosity, and I always thought that white was good, and as black people, we were nothing. We could never amount to anything. And in fact, we were cursed of the world. And so when I would go to church, it would just be to please my parents. I would go to church purely to look for girls and to look for chicks, and I had a whole bunch of us as friends, and one of my best friends is somebody that you know, that David Molapo, and we literally grew up together, went to the same church and Dutch Reform, and we never subscribed to it, so we just looked at it as a social club. I remember when I grew up and eventually went to boarding school, I wanted to get away from my parents completely, and I went to a boarding school in Limpopo, a place called Lolo High School, and that's where I went. And there was this thing called SCM, Student Christian Association, and I considered them a bunch of fanatics who basically were beaten by the world, and all they could do is clap hands and praise some God that existed somewhere who didn't care about the plight of Africans in the context that we live in. So I had a very a negative view towards Christianity. I remember one day I was invited. There were 3 soccer players who were coming from, at the time it was, now it's Polokwane, but at the time it was Petersburg, and they were coming through to preach, and I was invited, and I'll never forget it. I was invited to the meeting, and there was a guy named Clement Goma, who spoke about the 3 Hebrew boys who defied a king, and the king said, "If you don't obey my commands and my orders, I'm going to throw you in the fire." And truth be told, they said, "King, we're happy to do as you please, but we are not willing to obey this command because it goes against the grain of anything." Here are 3 guys who could stand in front of somebody and defy the edict or the order of the day and say, "We're going to do and serve our God. You can throw us in the fire if you want." And for me, I was shocked that that was in the Bible. And when something called salvation was called, I think I was the first one to raise a hand because I really wanted to know about these guys. And be that as it may, funny enough, my friend David, was at some other school. He had also gotten saved. And we compared notes and tried to understand what we're going through and the dynamics of our Christianity. And when we came home, there was a group called William Branham. There was a guy from the US called William Branham. And they baptized people by immersing them in water. And at the time, I think I was about 16 or 17, and I was still trying to find my own identity. But I'd given myself to the Lord. And the journey was to begin. And when the journey began, a very tedious, treacherous journey, I must tell you. But I thank God that it began, you know. And eventually we were baptized in Pretoria by that group called the Branhamites. And we snuck out and left and went to Pretoria for the entire weekend. And we got baptized and we met amazing people.